Well, we have a very interesting Clasico ahead this Saturday, particularly because of what we've seen so far from Barcelona and Real Madrid. But Alex Kirkland joining me now to discuss it for ESPN FC. Alex, let's begin with Real Madrid. Things really aren't looking good at the moment. Back-to-back losses. And that loss in the Champions League has definitely set the alarm bells off, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's back-to-back losses. And it's not just that. It's back-to-back losses at home and against teams they would really be expecting to beat. You know, you had newly promoted Cadiz in La Liga. You had a Shakhtar team who were missing, I think it was 6 first-choice players and a number of subs as well going into that game. And yet Madrid have lost both of them. I mean, you say the Cadiz game really set the alarm bells ringing. And then the Shakhtar game, that first half performance was just bizarre. It's one of the worst defensive displays I can remember, I think, from Real Madrid. It's the last thing they needed going into El Clasico. It's not as if Barca are in a perfect situation either, but definitely Real Madrid have got more problems right now. They've got problems in defence. I mean, the team as a whole hasn't necessarily been working that well. And actually, I think it's probably a bad sign that their best player lately has been Thibaut Courtois. You know, when the goalkeeper's getting you out of trouble consistently, it's not good news.
Yes, thank goodness for him at the moment, it seems, for Real Madrid. Sergio Ramos, a big miss for them in this game as well, because it's not just what he brings as a player, is it? It's everything that he brings as that leader on the pitch. And it did feel as though they were lacking that in that game against Shakhtar.
Yeah, as I was watching them just collapse in that first half, I couldn't help thinking, would this be any different with Sergio Ramos on the pitch? Look, that's not to say he's a perfect defender. I mean, he is inconsistent sometimes, and we have seen Real Madrid struggle defensively with Ramos in the team. But that lack of leadership, that kind of directionless, the fact that match was slipping away from them, I did feel like maybe Ramos could have made a difference. Rafael Varane, of course, is a brilliant defender. He's very, very experienced as well. But I sometimes think he's not the same player without Sergio Ramos alongside him. And this time it was Eder Militao partnering Varane. And Militao, I've got to say, I just keep waiting for Militao to kind of step up and really show us why Real Madrid bought him in the first place in 2019. And he hasn't done it so far. And last night, those two as a pairing, they were all over the place. They were out of position. They were letting Shakhtar run in behind. It's not just that Shakhtar scored 3 goals. I think they could have easily had a couple more. There were 3 more opportunities when Shakhtar were through on goal, 1-on-1. I think there was 1 in the first half and 2 in the second half. So it could have been even worse for Real Madrid.
And in fairness, even though it was a better second half for the likes of Marcelo, he has been under fire from the Spanish press of late, hasn't he? Especially when you see some of the statistics, they're pretty damning.
Yeah, I hate criticising Marcelo because he's been one of my favourite players to watch in La Liga for a long, long time. But the contrast between him and Ferland Mendy now Mendy played against Shakhtar out of position at right back, and he actually did okay, I thought. But Marcelo on the other side was very, very poor. And you mentioned the stats. I think it's 8 defeats in Zidane's second spell in charge, and Marcelo has started every single one of those, and it doesn't look good. Marcelo gets a lot of criticism. He's not the only one. I think in the big games now, and in the Clasico, for example, I think it has to be Mendy that starts at left back.
And it's changing so much, though, the Zidane of late. What have the journalists and the press and everybody made of all these changes? Because I saw that in his post-match press conference, Zidane had actually said that he couldn't use it as an excuse, but he did have to rest players because of the packed schedule. Yet it does seem that other teams who are also going through this in Europe are managing to do so. He's just making these wholesale changes, it seems, and it's not working.
But he won't change. He won't change that idea and that philosophy of rotating the squad over the course of the season. He's not going to change that. I think it's fundamental to his managerial style. It's worked for him in the past. We saw when Real Madrid had pretty much a team A and a team B when they won the league in Zidane's first spell in charge, and it really worked out. Now, maybe they don't quite have the squad now with having let players like Bale, like James Rodriguez go over the summer. Maybe they don't quite have the squad to be able to do that. But Zidane really believes in this. You ask how the journalists see it. Zidane gets asked about this in every press conference every week, and he actually gets a little bit frustrated, a little bit annoyed, I think, because he gets these persistent questions about this rotation policy. But he's been very clear. I think he was asked about it last week, and he said, "Look, I believe this is the best way to go through a season. In fact, not just the best way. He said this is the only way over a course of a season with La Liga, with the Champions League, with the Copa del Rey. You have to make the most of the squad." So it's not going to change. But you're right to say that. Looking at the Cadiz game, looking at the Shakhtar game, on those 2 occasions, his team selection, he didn't get it right.
We've talked team selection, we've talked defence. We have to talk about the goal scoring or the lack thereof, because we've seen the stats on this one. It's Jose Mourinho's first season that they last registered such a low goal scoring tally in the first 5 games of the season. And I suppose this is when you're really looking and wondering if, and I know there's the pandemic's hit and it's been difficult for a lot of teams, but when you look at no transfers coming in, just bringing loan players back, this is an area that they should have addressed in this transfer window, Alex.
Yeah, it's Karim Benzema or nothing, isn't it? He was rested against Shakhtar, and the team just doesn't look like it functions in attack without Benzema. I think Benzema always has to play whenever his fitness allows. Luka Jovic started against Shakhtar, and Jovic still, he doesn't look like he quite knows where he fits into the team. Maybe it's one of those situations where a striker just needs a bit of a break, a bit of good luck, needs a goal to go in, and then the goals will start to come. But it still hasn't happened for Luka Jovic. And I think it was pretty clear this summer that Zidane and the club would have been quite happy for Jovic to leave if the right club had been found. That didn't happen. They ended up letting Borja Mayoral go to Roma instead, and they kept Jovic. Zidane keeps giving Jovic opportunities. He keeps not taking them. And like I say, it's Benzema or no one, because Vinicius Jr. has been one of their better players, I think, and he was actually decent, and he scored off the bench against Shakhtar, but he's not necessarily a reliable goal scorer. Rodrigo, we keep waiting for him to put together a run of consistent form as well. Marco Asensio still hasn't lived up to the promise and the expectation, the hype that was, I think, rightly around him. So you look at all these options that aren't quite working in terms of goals, and otherwise it's the midfield. It's someone like Luka Modric to step up, or Fede Valverde, but none of these players ever look like being the really, really consistent goal scorers. So you come back to Karim Benzema.
With all the teams that are struggling, because there are a few, it's not just Real Madrid across Europe, we keep seeing the name Mauricio Pochettino trending on Twitter. It keeps coming up. It did amongst many of the Madridistas after that loss against Shakhtar. And it got me thinking, what's going to happen with Zinedine Zidane? Is he on the hot seat, or will it always be that the president, Florentino Perez, will always back him? And it would take Zidane having to walk away again if he were to leave the role.
Things can change very quickly at Real Madrid. We know that. It only takes a couple of defeats in a row, as we've seen this week, for the pressure to really start to build. Now, of course, Zidane is different. Zidane is special. No one really has the amount of credit that Zidane has in terms of what he means at this club and in terms of what he's won. But the pressure is growing, and it will increase with a defeat in El Clasico. There's no doubt about that. I think it is unlikely still that the club would sack Zidane, whatever happened in El Clasico. But the one thing I would say with Zidane, the one note of caution I would sound, is that because I think Zidane is a bit of a different case to most managers. Don't get me wrong, he loves being a coach. I think he loves especially being out on the training ground with the players. But you could always see him walking away if he honestly looked at himself, looked at the team, looked at the performances, and felt like he wasn't the right man for the job. I don't think that's something we can rule out if this run of form continues much longer. But like you say, I think it would be a little while yet before the club moved to sack him. Although let's not forget that a year ago, in very similar circumstances, when Madrid had started the season with a loss to PSG in the Champions League, they were beaten by Real Mallorca in La Liga, and they went and played Galatasaray, I think exactly a year ago. There's a lot of talk that if they hadn't won that game, Zidane might have been out. So like I say, because this club is so unique and because the demands are so high, even a figure like Zidane isn't immune to that kind of pressure.
Just so it's not all doom and gloom, what positives can the Madrid fans take from what we've seen so far, or just looking forward and looking ahead?
Well, let's not forget, this is only 2 games. Before that, they started the season okay with a draw and then 3 wins in La Liga. They're the champions of La Liga, let's not forget, and they put together an amazing run at the end of last season to win the league ahead of Barcelona. I mentioned Thibaut Courtois. His form is still exceptional, and that's good news. Sergio Ramos might well be fit for the Clasico. There are doubts about that. We're not 100% sure, but certainly our information is that he's hoping to be okay. They've still got a huge amount of quality. You still look at that midfield with Casemiro and Kroos and Modric. That's still, I think, is as good as it gets pretty much for any club. And Karim Benzema, as I say, is an exceptional footballer as well. And they do have a lot of these exciting young players who might still come good. It's just that maybe they can't be relied upon in the same way that they've relied upon some of these veterans over the last few years.
Let's get to Barcelona, because things aren't much better there, if at all, but it's been a bit of an up and down start to the season for them. Definitely more of an up this week with a big Champions League result for them. A loss last weekend in La Liga, which means both teams are coming into El Clasico on the back of a loss in La Liga. And let's start by talking about Ronald Koeman, because we're seeing something very different to what we've seen with other Barca coaches in recent history, where he actually does not so much criticise them, but definitely call his players out in the fact that he says even players like Messi, yeah, he's not at his best at the moment, and then he'll follow it up saying, but he's been doing well in training and he's my captain, la la la. We've seen him criticising Griezmann. We'll get to that in a minute, but this is definitely a different approach to what we've seen recently from Barca coaches, isn't it?
Yeah, Koeman's such a big character. I think he's not afraid to say what he thinks. I think that the things that he says, he does it for a reason. But I think sometimes he's going to walk a bit of a tightrope. And as you mentioned, we saw that, I think, with those Messi comments where he made the initial comment and then he looked to walk it back a little bit. He's being very, very careful. We know how delicate the Messi situation is at Barcelona with what happened this summer. And it's still ongoing. There's still this ongoing row at the club between the players and the captains and the board over pay cuts and things like that. So, of course, he wants to be careful with Messi. The Griezmann situation, how that's being managed is also very interesting. But like I say, Koeman is such a character that he's not going to be afraid to say what he thinks. In terms of his team, I think it's still too early really to make any judgments. They've started the season okay. They had that slip up against Getafe. They rectified it in the Champions League against a team you'd expect them to beat at home. And it's games like this Clasico that I think will allow us to start to form some real judgments about Koeman's Barca and how they look.
Do you think they've needed it? Do you think it's good to see this from a Barca coach? Or do you think that, as you're saying, it is really a fine line that he's walking?
No, I think absolutely it was necessary because I think that dressing room has been running the club for a long time. I think that a coach like Ernesto Valverde, for all of his faults, and I know he was unpopular with a lot of Barca fans, I think he did a really good job of managing the dressing room. But his way of managing the dressing room was sort of to let them have their way. And you had these big characters like Messi, like Luis Suarez, like Arturo Vidal. It's no coincidence that two of those three are no longer at the club. And they were running things. And there was a feeling from certain other Barcelona players in that dressing room that maybe a little bit more authority was needed and that the players should have been working a little bit harder in training. Then Quique Setién came in and he lacked authority from day one, frankly, because some of those top players didn't respect him and didn't think that he had earned that job and didn't think that he had the CV to be in the position that he suddenly found himself in. Now you've got someone like Koeman who does have, in terms of a CV, a lengthy one. It's had some ups and downs along the way, but he's a Barca icon. He's a legend at that club, and he does have the authority. And so it is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. We've seen Koeman fall out with players in the past. I'm sure he's learned from those experiences, but we can't rule out that happening again. But there's no doubt it is still a powder keg at Barcelona just waiting to go off, especially with some of these off the pitch situations that I mentioned.
And yet he says that there's no issue with him and Griezmann, although if you actually look at the comments, it does seem otherwise. He criticised him after the Sevilla game. Then Griezmann used the international break to say that he's played in the right position with France and that he feels more important there. And he even, it seemed, had a bit of a dig at his teammates, saying that he feels loved almost by his French teammates. This is a strange situation. Last time I was on with you, we were talking about how vital it was, or at least everyone was seeing it, for Griezmann to start in the game against
I was saying that, yeah.
Game. And now it's to the point where people are saying maybe he shouldn't start. Maybe he won't start in El Clasico. What's gone on?
I've been a defender of Griezmann. As you say, I've done it when I've been talking to you. I think it's getting increasingly hard to defend him for Barcelona because, quite frankly, he keeps not delivering. Now, it's true that he hasn't quite found his role in the team. It's true that his arrival right from the start of Barcelona was difficult. And there was a reluctance on the part of some of these big players that I'm talking about in the dressing room to really accept Griezmann and welcome him as one of their own. But that's sort of in the past now. You know, enough time has gone by that it's beyond time for Griezmann to start delivering on the pitch. He is getting opportunities. We saw it against Getafe in La Liga last weekend, where he was sort of alternating between the right-hand side and the middle, but he was spending time in the middle, and he got one or two crucial chances in that game, and he didn't take them. We saw him put one of those shots over the bar. So those are the kind of situations that he needs to be converting those chances. Like I say, I've been a big defender of Griezmann in general, but it's getting more and more difficult to adopt that position now. He didn't feature at all in the Champions League in midweek. And again, I'd love to back him to start in the Clasico and to have an impact and make a difference. But it's not easy to make that argument because, well, Messi needs to be in there. Ansu Fati right now needs to be in there as well. And then I guess you've got one more of that front three to fill. And do you do that with Griezmann? Do you do it with Dembele? Do you do it with Coutinho and change the system a little bit? It's hard to say, but Griezmann, he really is running out of chances to convince at this stage.
I know there was mixed feelings about him towards the end of his Barcelona career, but do you think they're missing Luis Suarez?
Yes, because I don't think they have as pure a goal scorer as Luis Suarez in that squad. It's not a coincidence that Koeman wanted Memphis Depay, didn't get him, but he was really clear he wanted a number 9. He was clearly recognising the lack of although Memphis didn't earlier in his career wasn't a number 9, he's become more of a central player at Lyon. And Koeman clearly recognised a deficiency in the squad. They didn't manage to sort that out. So clearly they think there's an issue there. We know that Messi scores plenty of goals. We know that Ansu Fati is capable of doing it as well. And some of the other players that I mentioned, there's some positive signs from someone like Trincao as well from wide positions. And yes, Luis Suarez was frustrating at times for Barca. And yes, the flaws in his game that had kind of become more apparent over the years, it was getting to the point where you couldn't necessarily ignore them. And it was an obstacle to the kind of football that Barca wanted to play. But as a goal scorer, I think there's no doubt that they're going to miss him at times this season.
So what can Barca fans smile about so far this season?
I think Barca have got plenty to smile about. I mean, it was good news, even if it came in strange circumstances. Those 4 contract renewals that they announced just after the Champions League game in midweek. Now that's all tied up with these negotiations over wages. But a contract renewal for Ter Stegen is terrific news, and that wasn't a given over the last year or two. He hasn't always been happy with how things have been going at Barcelona. I think there are signs, like I say, from this Koeman team, there are positive signs from him as being the kind of man that they need. There are signs that the team are improving, and they've got, I mean, Ansu Fati, talk about reasons to be positive. It doesn't get any more than Ansu Fati, and the fact that they managed to hold on to Leo Messi in the end somehow in the summer. So there's some exciting things about this Barca team, but I still think it's really early to make any kind of judgment. Let's make some judgments maybe after this Clasico and not before. All
right, finally, who is in the worst shape coming into it, Barcelona or Real Madrid?
Well, Madrid, no question. Having lost to Cadiz, having lost to Shakhtar in the way that they did, there's no question that Madrid go into this with more question marks. I think, like I say, it's too early to judge either team, I think. But Madrid, certainly the pressure and the feeling here in Madrid is that they need a result now in this Clasico to stop the rot that we've seen in the last 7 days. Barca are in a better position, but all of this can change. All of this is entirely dependent on what happens in this Clasico.
Yeah, El Clasico can always throw up some surprises. We'll see what Saturdays has to offer.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.